You know, we think we have a handle on human history. We draw a linear timeline, starting simple and getting progressively more complex. It's neat, it makes sense. But sometimes the Earth decides to rewrite the script. Imagine finding complex machinery encased in million-year-old rock, or a crystal dagger sharpened to a precision that should be impossible for its era. These aren't just myths. These are physical objects, out-of-place artifacts that defy our understanding of when and how things were made. What if our past is not a line, but a series of forgotten cycles? Today, we analyze 10 artifacts that are proving history is anything but neat. Let's find them. Let's start our journey in the rolling hills of West Dunbartonshire, Scotland. The year is 1887. An archaeologist named James Harvey walks onto a plot of farmland and uncovers a massive flat stone slab. It measures 13 by 8 meters. That's huge, roughly the size of a modern backyard patio. But it wasn't the size that made his jaw drop. It was what was carved into it. The entire surface was completely covered in over 100 intricate, prehistoric symbols, spirals, geometric lines, and strange indentations known as cup and ring marks. Now here's where the story takes a frustrating turn. For decades, this stone sat exposed to the world. And by the 1960s, a sad reality set in. Tourists were walking all over it, vandals were scratching their names into the prehistoric art, and nature was eroding the carvings. So, in 1965, archaeologists made a radical, heartbreaking decision. To save the stone, they had to bury it. They covered this magnificent, ancient relic under tons of soil and dirt, intentionally hiding it from the human eye. For over 50 years, the Cochno stone became nothing more than a myth buried beneath a public park. People literally walked their dogs over it, completely unaware that one of the world's greatest prehistoric mysteries was right beneath their feet. It wasn't until recently, in 2016, that a team of researchers finally got permission to carefully dig it back up for just a few days. They used cutting-edge 3D laser scanning technology to map every single microscopic groove. And what they found left scientists completely divided. You see, these carvings are over 5,000 years old. That dates back to the Neolithic era. We are talking about a time before the pyramids of Egypt were built, long before written language existed in Western Europe. Yet, the geometric precision of the concentric circles is staggering. How did hunter-gatherers lay out such perfect geometry on uneven rock? More importantly, why? The theories are wild. Some astronomers look at the digital maps and argue it's a primitive star map, a complex cosmic calendar used to track eclipses and constellations. Others believe it's a spiritual map of the underworld, or perhaps a tribal boundary marker showing who owned the land. The takeaway here is profound. The Cochno stone shatters the stereotype that our ancient ancestors were primitive or simplistic. 5,000 years ago, without metal tools, computers, or paper, these people were obsessed with geometry, space, and leaving a permanent message for the future. A message that we are still, to this day, trying to decode. In 1957, the academic world was rocked by a discovery that threatened to rewrite the textbook on European exploration. A strange parchment map surfaced on the antiquities market, bought by a wealthy benefactor and gifted to Yale University. On the surface, it looked like a standard medieval map of the world. You could see Europe, Asia, and Africa. But then, researchers zoomed into the top left corner, into the uncharted waters of the North Atlantic. And there, sitting in the cold ocean, was a large, beautifully detailed island labeled Vinland. This was earth-shattering. The map was allegedly drawn in 1440. That is a full 50 years before Christopher Columbus ever set sail for the New World. For decades, history books had taught that Columbus discovered America. But this map offered physical proof of what Scandinavian sagas had hinted at for centuries, that Norse Vikings, led by Leif Erikson, had not only reached the shores of North America around the year 1000, but they had accurately mapped it. If this document was authentic, it meant medieval Europeans knew about America long before the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria left Spain. It was hailed as the greatest cartographic find of the 20th century. Yale valued it at modern equivalents of tens of millions of dollars. But almost immediately, a shadow of doubt began to creep in. The ink looked a bit too clean, the parchment felt a bit too well preserved. And so one of the most intense, multi-decade forensic investigations in scientific history began. Teams of physicists, chemists, and historians lined up to test the map. They analyzed the fibers of the calfskin parchment. They used carbon dating. Interestingly, the parchment itself was actually old, dating back to the 15th century. The hoaxer had used a genuine piece of blank medieval paper to fool everyone. But the ultimate undoing of the Vinland Map didn't come from the paper, it came from the ink. In 2021, a definitive, high-tech study by the Yale University Library put the mystery to rest once and for all. Scientists used macro X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to scan the entire map line by line. They discovered that the ink contained extremely high levels of titanium, specifically a synthetic compound called anatase. Here is the catch. Humanity didn't learn how to manufacture that specific titanium pigment until the 1920s. The Vinland Map was a masterfully crafted 20th century forgery. The takeaway? It's a powerful warning for all of us. No matter how much we want an artifact to be a history-shattering truth, science and objective data must always have the final say. For centuries, whispering legends circulated throughout China about ancient rulers who achieved immortality not through magic potions, but by encasing their entire bodies in suits made of solid gemstone. For a long time, mainstream historians dismissed these stories. They thought it was mere poetic exaggeration, a myth created to honor the dead Han Dynasty emperors. But all of that changed in 1968. In Lingshan County, Hebei Province, Chinese soldiers accidentally stumbled upon a hidden, monumental tomb cut deep into a limestone mountain. Inside, they found the resting places of Prince Liu Sheng and his wife, Princess Do Wan. And there, lying in the darkness, were two fully intact, shimmering armor suits made completely out of jade. When I say a suit of jade, I don't mean a few pieces of jewelry. I mean a complete, head-to-toe metallic-like armor garment. Prince Liu Sheng's suit alone was constructed from exactly 2,498 individual plaques of solid jade. And tying these thousands of fragile gemstone tiles together, over 1 kilogram of solid, pure gold wire, meticulously threaded through tiny holes at the corners of every single tile. In ancient Chinese culture, jade was believed to possess magical, incorruptible properties. People thought it could physically prevent the human flesh from decaying and ward off evil spirits, securing eternal life for the royal soul. But here is the engineering mystery that makes this artifact truly mind-boggling. This tomb dates back to roughly 113 BC. At that time, humanity did not have modern steel tools, diamond-tip drills, or electrical rotary carvers. Jade is an exceptionally hard and brittle mineral. It's tougher than steel. Try to picture the sheer, agonizing precision required back then. Master craftsmen had to slice blocks of raw jade into wafer-thin plaques, polish them until they were perfectly flat, and then drill microscopic, identical holes through the edges of each piece without cracking them. Experts estimate that creating just one of these suits would have required 10 full years of continuous, highly skilled, expert manual labor. It was a massive, industrial-scale project dedicated entirely to a single dead man. The sheer cost and labor required were so astronomical that later Han emperors actually banned the production of jade burial suits entirely because they were bankrupting the royal treasury. The takeaway here is a profound testament to ancient human capability. Long before the Industrial Revolution, ancient civilizations could mobilize thousands of artisans, establish complex transcontinental jade trade networks, and master precision metallurgy to turn an impossible, mythical dream of immortality into a physical, breathtaking reality. They didn't just build monuments, they engineered eternity. In alternative history circles on the internet, you will often hear rumors of a mysterious, flawlessly carved Maya crystal dagger. But if you dig into actual archaeological records, you'll find that the true story is even more mind-boggling. And it didn't come from the Maya. It was found in southwestern Spain. The year was 2010. Excavators working at the megalithic tomb of Montelirio, a massive prehistoric burial site near Seville, uncovered a collection of ancient remains. But as they cleared away millennia of dirt from one specific corner, they found an object that looked like it belonged in a fantasy film. It was a dagger blade, measuring nearly 8.5 inches long, carved entirely out of pure, translucent rock crystal. Now let's put this into chronological perspective. This tomb dates back to roughly 3000 BC. That means this crystal dagger is over 5,000 years old. It coexisted with the dawn of the Bronze Age. When you look closely at this weapon, its beauty is almost haunting. The crystal is so incredibly clear that if you held it up to a book, you could read the words right through the blade. The handle was originally crafted from ivory, making it one of the most visually stunning luxury items ever found from the European Copper Age. But how on earth did prehistoric humans make this without breaking it? This is where the engineering nightmare begins. Rock crystal is not like ordinary stone or flint. It is made of macrocrystalline quartz, which is exceptionally brittle, highly prone to fracturing, and incredibly hard. In prehistoric times, weapons were shaped using a process called knapping, essentially striking a rock with bone or stone tools to flake away pieces and create a sharp edge. If you strike rock crystal just a fraction of a millimeter too hard, or at the wrong angle, the entire block will violently shatter into tiny, useless fragments. Yet the artisan who made this dagger managed to flake the crystal down to a uniform, incredibly thin thickness, creating a razor-sharp, serrated edge along the entire blade with absolute micromillimeter precision. Furthermore, geologists analyzed the crystal and found that there were no rock crystal mines anywhere near Seville. This material had to be imported from hundreds of miles away. This tells us that 5,000 years ago, Europe had highly organized, elite trade networks. This dagger was never meant for actual combat. It's far too fragile. It was a supreme symbol of power, likely belonging to a high priest or tribal leader who wanted to show they commanded both trade and the impossible laws of craftsmanship. The ultimate takeaway? Long before modern machinery, ancient humans possessed a level of patience and hand-eye coordination that borders on the miraculous. They looked at a hard, unforgiving block of glass-like crystal and saw a masterpiece. In June 2011, a team of professional Swedish treasure hunters called Ocean X was scanning the ocean floor in the Baltic Sea, searching for old shipwrecks. Suddenly, their side-scan sonar emitted a bizarre image from a depth of nearly 300 feet. There, sitting in the pitch-black freezing water, was a massive circular structure measuring 60 meters in diameter. But it didn't look like a natural rock formation. It possessed perfectly straight edges, 90-degree angles, and raised structures that looked like steps. When the sonar image was released to the public, the internet exploded. It looked uncannily like the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars, or a massive flying saucer that had crashed into the ocean floor millennia ago. The mystery deepened when the dive team reported that their electronic equipment, satellite phones, and cameras completely malfunctioned whenever they cruised directly above the object. They claimed the electronics only worked again once they drifted about 200 meters away. Alternative theorists went wild. Was this an ancient UFO covered in deep-sea sediment? Or perhaps a top-secret, sunken anti-submarine weapon tracking station from World War II built by the Nazis? The world demanded answers, and finally, marine geologists stepped in to get physical samples. Divers braved the treacherous Baltic waters, hammered off pieces of the Anomaly, and sent them to laboratories for rigorous testing. The scientific analysis was exhaustive. Researchers at Stockholm University examined the mineral composition of the samples. If this was an alien spaceship or an industrial military bunker, they expected to find exotic synthetic alloys, manufactured metals, or processed concrete. But what did the laboratory results actually show? The anomaly was composed of entirely natural materials: granites, gneisses, and sandstones, ordinary rocks that you can find anywhere on the surface of northern Europe. There was no alien metal, no concrete, and no advanced technology. So how do we explain those perfectly straight lines, right angles, and the round shape? Geologists pointed to the region's dramatic history. During the last ice age, massive moving glaciers covered the Baltic Sea basin. As these gargantuan sheets of ice advanced and retreated over thousands of years, they cracked, carved, and violently dragged colossal stone pillars across the Earth. The Baltic Sea anomaly is a classic geological illusion. It is a stunning example of how nature can mimic intelligent design and trick our human brains. The ultimate takeaway here: our eyes love to see patterns and mysteries where they don't exist. But sometimes the true power of nature to shape the Earth is far more incredible than any science fiction story we can invent. Imagine unearthing an official, ancient document that proves humans were witnessing unidentified flying objects over 3,000 years ago. That is exactly what ufologists claimed happened in the winter of 1933. Alberto Tulli, the director of the Vatican Museum's Egyptian section, was exploring an antiquities shop in the heart of Cairo. Tucked away in a dusty corner, he discovered a severely damaged, ancient papyrus written in hieratic, a cursive form of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Tulli couldn't afford to buy the artifact itself, so being a meticulous scholar, he pulled out a notepad and carefully copied the hieroglyphs down, line by line. When that text was later translated into modern languages, it sent absolute shockwaves through the scientific world. The text allegedly described a terrifying event that occurred during the 22nd year of the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III, around 1480 BC. According to the translation, the Egyptian scribes looked up at the sky and saw a massive fiery disk floating silently over the Nile. It had no sound, and its body was described as 1 rod long and 1 rod wide. But it gets crazier. A few days later, the sky was completely filled with these glowing disks, shining brighter than the sun itself. The text literally states that these fiery objects ascended back into the heavens, and fish and birds began raining down from the sky. It sounded like an ironclad, ancient military record of an alien armada invading ancient Egypt. For decades, the Tulli Papyrus was cited as the ultimate definitive proof of ancient astronauts. But as the years rolled on, mainstream Egyptologists began asking a very simple, yet devastating question. Where is the actual papyrus? When researchers went to the Vatican Museum to examine the original document, it was nowhere to be found. Alberto Tulli had passed away, and his family claimed the original shop owner in Cairo had taken it back. All that remained of this world-changing discovery was Tulli's hand-drawn copy of a translation of a translation. In the late 20th century, professional linguists and skeptics finally sat down to reverse-engineer Tulli's copied hieroglyphs. And what they found was a linguistic disaster. They realized that the grammar and specific vocabulary used in the UFO text matched perfectly with a famous, standard Egyptian grammar textbook written by a scholar named Sir Alan Gardner. The hoaxer had literally taken random sentences from a modern textbook, sentences like "the birds rained down" and "the fiery disk," and pasted them together to form a fake alien story. The Tulli Papyrus was a brilliant engineered forgery. The ultimate takeaway? A sensational claim is only as good as the physical evidence backing it up. If the artifact itself vanishes into thin air, chances are the mystery was never real to begin with. If you travel down the Nile to the ancient city of Abydos, you will find the magnificent temple of Seti I. It is a masterpiece of traditional Egyptian art. But if you walk out the back of the temple and look down into a massive, excavated pit, you will see something that looks like it belongs to an entirely different epoch. This is the Osireion, a subterranean megalithic complex that sits nearly 50 feet below the level of the surrounding temples. When British archaeologists first dug it out of the sand in 1902, they were stunned. They weren't looking at the typical delicate limestone carvings of the New Kingdom. They were standing in front of colossal, monolithic granite blocks that look less like traditional Egyptian architecture and more like a minimalist industrial fortress. The central hall of the Osireion is built from 10 massive red granite pillars, each weighing up to a staggering 100 tons. To put that in perspective, that is heavier than 2 fully loaded commercial airplanes. What makes these artifacts appear as though they shouldn't exist is the sheer, brutal precision of their engineering. These giant granite blocks are cut with perfectly straight lines, flat faces, and uniform right angles. They are placed together with no mortar or cement between them. Yet the joints are so flush, so perfectly tight, that you cannot even slide a credit card or a thin piece of paper between these 100-ton stones. Furthermore, red granite is exceptionally hard. It is filled with quartz crystals. According to standard history, the ancient Egyptians of the Old and New Kingdoms only possessed copper and bronze chisels. But mathematically, copper cannot cut hard granite. The copper will simply bend and blunt instantly. So, how did they do it? Alternative history channels will tell you it required advanced acoustic levitation or alien laser technology. But the real insight from modern experimental archaeology reveals a far more inspiring truth about human ingenuity. The ancient Egyptian stonemasons were masters of friction and materials. They didn't cut the granite, they wore it down. They used heavy copper saws and tubular drills, but the secret weapon was quartz sand mixed with water. The copper tool acted merely as a guide, pushing the sharp sand grains against the granite. Under immense pressure, the sand acted as a high-efficiency abrasive, slowly grinding through the rock millimeter by millimeter over thousands of agonizing hours. The Osireion granite blocks are a timeless masterclass in ancient physics, mathematics, and absolute patience. Because the complex sits so deep, the rising water table fills the central island, creating a sacred, reflective pool that mirrors these colossal pillars. The ultimate takeaway? Never mistake a lack of modern machinery for a lack of intelligence. The builders of the Osireion didn't need lasers or supernatural aid. They possessed an unshakable generational willpower, transforming raw, brutal mountain stone into an eternal monument of human genius. In 1973, a group of construction workers was digging a trench near the Mureș River, just outside the town of Aiud, Romania. 35 feet below the surface, their excavator struck something hard. They pulled out 3 unusual objects embedded deep within the sand. 2 of them were easily identified by paleontologists. They were the fossilized leg bones of a mastodon, an extinct, elephant-like creature that died out at least 11,000 years ago. But it was the third object that left the entire team completely paralyzed with confusion. It was a heavy, man-made, metallic wedge. It had machined holes drilled through it, smooth geometric indentations, and a layer of oxide coating that suggested it had been buried for a very, very long time. The wedge was sent to the Archaeological Institute of Cluj-Napoca for chemical analysis. And when the lab results came back, the historical timeline didn't just bend. It completely broke. The report showed that the object was composed of roughly 89% aluminum, mixed with copper, zinc, and silicon. Now, let's look at the absolute impossibility of this data. Humanity did not discover how to isolate and smelt elemental aluminum until the year 1825. It requires massive amounts of electricity and modern industrial factories. Yet here was an engineered aluminum wedge buried in the exact same pristine geological layer of Earth as 35,000-year-old prehistoric bones. Alternative history authors quickly declared it definitive proof of ancient astronauts or an advanced, forgotten human civilization. For decades, the Wedge of Aiud remained a holy grail for anomaly hunters. But science is a process of relentless questioning. In the late 20th century, aeronautical and industrial engineers finally got a look at the physical blueprints of the object. They bypassed the alien theories and asked a much more practical question: what does this shape actually do? When they compared the wedge to modern industrial machinery, the mystery began to crack wide open. The shape, the dimensions, and the holes matched perfectly with a specific mechanical tooth, an alloy bucket tooth used on massive, heavy-duty industrial excavators in the mid-20th century. So how did a modern excavator tooth end up buried 35 feet underground next to prehistoric mastodon bones? Geologists call this stratigraphic confusion. The Mureș River basin is highly volatile, prone to soft mud, shifting sands, and heavy flooding. Decades prior, during local drilling or river engineering projects, a heavy machine broke its steel aluminum bucket tooth. Over the years, the immense weight of the metal tooth caused it to sink rapidly through the soft, waterlogged river sediment, eventually settling right next to the ancient fossils. The ultimate takeaway? Sometimes a history-shattering mystery is just an accidental geological trap. We must always be careful not to mistake modern industrial trash for ancient, out-of-place treasure. In the year 1872, near the shores of Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, a group of construction workers was digging a hole for a fence post. Deep in the dirt, one of the workers struck a strange, dark object. When he wiped away the mud, he wasn't looking at an ordinary rock. He was holding a perfectly smooth, egg-shaped stone made of dark quartzite, measuring about 4 inches long. But what made his jaw drop was the surface. The stone was covered in incredibly detailed, miniature carvings. There was a haunting human face staring back at him. On the other sides, there were symbols of tepes, a crescent moon, an ear of corn, and strange abstract circles. It looked like an ancient, sacred relic from a long-lost Native American tribe. The object became known as the Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone. In the late 19th century, the American public was absolutely obsessed with it. Local antiquarians argued it was a peace treaty marker between warring tribes, or perhaps a deeply spiritual thunderstone dropped from the heavens. But there were two massive anomalies that didn't make sense. First, quartzite is an incredibly hard, unyielding material. Carving such intricate faces and shapes into it using primitive bone or flint tools would be nearly impossible without shattering the surface. The second anomaly was even more bizarre. Perfect, uniform holes had been bored straight through the top and the bottom of the egg-shaped stone, meeting exactly in the center. For over a century, the stone sat in the Museum of New Hampshire History, drawing millions of curious visitors. But in 1994, state archaeologists decided it was time to move past speculation and look at the stone under modern technology. They placed the mystery stone under a high-powered forensic microscope. They wanted to analyze the microscopic grooves inside the drilled holes to see how those ancient craftsmen had bored through solid quartzite. And what the microscope revealed changed the entire narrative. The scratches inside the boreholes were perfectly uniform, concentric, and showed no irregularities. They weren't made by a primitive hand-turned stone awl or a bone drill. The markings matched perfectly with the physical signature left by a modern, 19th-century steel power drill or a mechanized lathe. The stone itself might be old, but the carvings in the holes were manufactured during the Victorian era. The Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone wasn't an ancient Native American relic. It was a highly sophisticated 19th-century folk art creation, or a deliberate hoax designed to exploit the Victorian obsession with Indian antiquities. The ultimate takeaway? The human desire to find a mystery often creates one. When looking at the past, we must look closer than the naked eye allows, because the truth is usually hidden in the microscopic details. And now we have arrived at our 10th and final anomaly. This object is perhaps the most modern-looking, jarring piece of evidence in the entire debate over out-of-place artifacts. The year was 1998. An electrical engineer named John J. Williams was hiking through a remote, rural area in North America. Walking through the dirt, he spotted a strange rock half buried in the ground. He picked it up, wiped away the mud, and immediately felt a chill run down his spine. The object was a small, natural piece of solid granite, but protruding straight out of the hard stone was something that physically should not be there. It looked exactly like a modern, manufactured electrical component, specifically a triple-prong electrical plug, seamlessly embedded directly inside the solid matrix of the ancient rock. Williams, being an electrical engineer, knew exactly how impossible this was. He named the object the Enigmalith, a combination of the words enigma and monolith. According to traditional geology, granite takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years to naturally form and harden deep within the Earth's crust. Yet here was a consumer-grade electrical plug fused inside it. When the story broke, the internet erupted with wild theories. Was this the smoking gun proving a highly advanced, prehistoric human civilization that possessed electricity millions of years ago? Or was it the remnants of a time traveler's equipment? Or perhaps a piece of forgotten alien technology dropped on Earth eons ago? Williams claimed that a geologist had examined the stone and confirmed it was roughly 100,000 years old. The Enigmalith instantly became a holy grail for anomaly hunters. The prongs were made of an unknown metallic material, and they sat within a perfectly round, ceramic-like matrix that looked industrially manufactured. But as the scientific community began to demand a closer look, this ultimate mystery started to develop some very serious, undeniable red flags. Scientists and geologists lined up to perform definitive laboratory tests. They wanted to take a diamond saw, cut the rock in half, and analyze the internal border where the metal plug met the solid granite. If it was naturally formed, the crystal structures of the stone would weave perfectly around the plug. But John Williams flatly refused. Williams locked the stone away, stating he would only allow non-destructive testing. Not long after, he put the artifact up for sale on the internet for a staggering $500,000. Geologists and industrial model makers quickly stepped in to point out how easily this anomaly could be faked. Using modern, high-strength industrial resins, granite dust, and advanced polymers, anyone can effortlessly drill a hole into a real piece of granite, insert an electrical plug, and seal it so perfectly that it looks entirely seamless to the naked eye. The ultimate takeaway from our final artifact is a lesson in critical thinking. True science requires absolute transparency and open, peer-reviewed testing. When an object's owner refuses to let scientists cut it open and instead slaps a $500,000 price tag on it, the object isn't a history-shattering mystery. It is a highly engineered financial hustle. Looking back at these 10 astonishing phenomena, the ultimate lesson isn't about proving science fiction right. It's about restoring the recognition it deserves. We don't need to invent stories of lost alien technology or advanced lasers to make our ancient history fascinating. The truth is already amazing. When you look at an intricate stone circle in Scotland, or a perfectly carved dagger from pure crystal, the real mystery isn't who provided the tools to our ancestors. The mystery is what propelled humans with just bone, water, and sand to achieve such absolute, enduring perfection. So keep questioning the headlines, look beyond the sensational claims, and always seek the data hidden beneath the surface. Our ancestors weren't primitive, they were intelligent, patient, and incredibly creative. Thank you for joining me on today's exploration. Please continue to observe more closely, and I will see you again in the next investigation.